I'm Callum Ridgway, 33 years old, and I used to think my life was pretty good. 3 months ago, I'd have told you my marriage to Marissa was solid, maybe even something to be proud of. We'd been together for 7 years, and I thought we'd figured out how to make it work despite our differences. She came from a world of old money, fancy houses, private schools, and family names that meant something. I came from a blue-collar life. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a nurse, and we never had much beyond what we needed. When we met, I was just a guy fixing computers, and she was this bright, beautiful woman who didn't seem to care about where I came from. I thought we were equals, or at least I convinced myself we were. But looking back, I see the cracks were always there, waiting to split wide open. Her family, her mother Blythe and her older brother Gregory, never liked me. Every time I was around them, it felt like I was auditioning for a part I'd never get. They'd smile, sure, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach their eyes. Marissa always brushed it off, saying, "They'll come around, Callum, just give them time." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But 7 years is a long time to wait for people to stop treating you like dirt under their polished shoes. Things had been tense for a while, little arguments here and there, but nothing I couldn't handle. That is, until the annual family reunion up in New York. It was supposed to be a weekend of bonding, a chance to smooth things over. Marissa begged me to go, said it'd be different this time, that her family would see me for who I was. I wasn't thrilled about it, honestly. I'd rather have stayed home and fixed a dozen broken laptops than face her relatives again, but I went for her. The estate was this huge colonial house perched on a cliff, all steep staircases and cold, echoing rooms. It was beautiful in a way that made you feel small, like you didn't belong unless you were born into it. From the moment we arrived, I could feel the weight of their stares. Blythe greeted me with a handshake so limp I barely felt it, and Gregory smirked like he knew something I didn't. The whole weekend stretched out in front of me like a test I hadn't prepared for, and I wasn't wrong. Every conversation was a minefield. I'd say something simple, like how nice the weather was, and Blythe would correct me, saying it was unseasonably warm for this time of year, as if I'd insulted the family by not knowing. Gregory would chime in with some backhanded comment about my job, asking if I'd ever thought about moving up in the world. I'd laugh it off, try to keep the peace, but inside, I was boiling. Marissa kept telling me to relax, that they didn't mean anything by it, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew they did. By the second day, I was counting the hours until we could leave. I kept my head down, stayed polite, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. It just kept slipping away. Dinner that night was the breaking point. We were all gathered around this long, polished table, candles flickering, silverware clinking, and I thought maybe I could make it through without a fight. Marissa squeezed my hand under the table, like she was rooting for me, and for a second, I felt okay. But then Gregory started in again, louder this time, and Blythe joined him, picking apart everything from the way I sat to the shirt I'd picked out. I could feel the room closing in, all those eyes on me, waiting for me to mess up. I don't know why I thought it'd be different. Maybe I was just tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Maybe I wanted to prove something to them, to Marissa, to myself. Whatever it was, it set the stage for everything that came after, and by the end of that weekend, I wasn't the same man who'd walked through those doors. That reunion wasn't just a family gathering. It was the start of a storm I didn't see coming, one that had been brewing quietly for years. I'm Callum Ridgway, and I've never been good at hiding how I feel, especially not that night at the reunion. The family estate up in New York was like something out of a movie, big, old, and cold, with its cliffside view and endless staircases winding up to rooms I wasn't allowed to see. Marissa had dragged me there, promising it'd be different this time, that her family would finally ease up on me. I didn't believe her, not really, but I went anyway because I loved her and because I kept hoping she'd be right one day. The whole place smelled like money and judgment, and from the minute we pulled up, I knew I was in for it. Gregory, her older brother, was waiting by the front door with that smirk of his, like he'd already won some game I didn't know we were playing. Blythe, her mother, swept out in a cloud of perfume and gave me a look that said I'd tracked mud on her perfect floors, even though my shoes were clean. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just a couple days, but every step I took in that house felt like I was walking deeper into a trap. Marissa kept whispering to me, "Just smile, Callum, they'll warm up," but her voice sounded more desperate than sure. Dinner was the real test, though. We all sat down at this massive table, the kind you see in pictures of royalty, with candles and crystal glasses and more forks than I knew what to do with. I dressed up, put on a tie, even though I hate them, because I wanted to fit in, or at least not give them an easy target. The food came out, fancy stuff I couldn't pronounce, and I kept my mouth shut, nodding along while they talked about people and places I'd never heard of. Then Gregory started in. "So, Callum," he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world, "still tinkering with those computers? Must be nice to have such a simple life." His tone was all sharp edges, and a few of her cousins snickered. I forced a laugh, said something about how I liked my work, but he didn't let up. "Ever think about doing something more ambitious?" he asked, and I could feel Blythe's eyes on me, waiting for me to trip over my answer. I mumbled something about being happy where I was, and Marissa squeezed my knee under the table, like that was supposed to help. It didn't. The room kept buzzing with their chatter, and I felt like a ghost, just there, not really part of it. Then I got this dumb idea to give a toast. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it'd show them I wasn't some outsider, that I belonged at that table with my wife. I stood up, cleared my throat, and started talking about gratitude, about how lucky I felt to be part of their family. I kept it short, simple, nothing fancy, but halfway through, her cousins started laughing. Not loud, just this quiet, mean chuckle that spread like a ripple. My face burned, and I stopped, looking around at all those faces, some amused, some bored, none of them on my side. I raised my voice, not yelling, just firm, and said, "I'm serious. I mean this." The laughter died, and the room went dead quiet. I thought maybe I'd gotten through, that they'd heard me for once. But then Blythe stood up, slow and deliberate, like she was about to deliver a verdict. "We don't tolerate tantrums at this table, Callum," she said, her voice ice cold. "Tantrums. Like I was a kid throwing a fit instead of a man trying to say something real." I looked at Marissa, waiting for her to say something, anything, to back me up. She didn't. She just stared at her wine glass, swirling it like it held all the answers. My chest tightened, and I sat back down, the silence pressing in on me. The rest of dinner dragged on, forks scraping plates, voices picking up again like nothing happened, but I was done. I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't just another bad night. It was the start of something breaking. Gregory smirked across the table, Blythe sipped her drink, and Marissa wouldn't meet my eyes. I tried to reach out, to build a bridge with that stupid toast, and they'd burned it down before I could finish. I kept my mouth shut after that, nodding when I had to, but inside, I was raging. Not loud, not wild, just this steady, growing heat I couldn't shake. I'd spent years taking their jabs, swallowing my pride, telling myself it was worth it for her. But sitting there, watching her choose her wine over me, I started to wonder how much more I could take. The night ended with polite goodbyes and fake smiles, and I followed Marissa up to our room, the weight of that moment still hanging over me. I didn't know it yet, but that toast gone cold was the first crack in a wall I'd been holding up for too long. I'm Callum Ridgway, and I've never been one for big blowouts. But that night after dinner at the reunion, I couldn't keep it in anymore. We'd made it back to the guest room Marissa and I were sharing, some fancy setup with a 4-poster bed and curtains that probably cost more than my car. The door clicked shut behind us, and I just stood there for a second, staring at the floor, trying to figure out how to say what I'd been holding back for years. My tie was choking me, so I yanked it off and tossed it on the chair, the whole night replaying in my head Gregory's smirks, Blythe's cold dismissal, and Marissa sitting there like a statue while her family laughed at me. I turned to her, and she was already perched on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. "What was that, Callum?" she asked, her voice low but sharp, like she was scolding a kid. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool, and said, "I've had enough, Marissa. I'm done with this." She rolled her eyes, and that little move lit a fire in me. "You're too sensitive," she said, like it was some fact I should have known by now. "They were just joking. You didn't have to make a scene." A scene? I hadn't yelled, hadn't thrown anything, just raised my voice to finish a toast they'd turned into a punchline. I stepped closer, hands clenched at my sides, and said, "I'm your husband, not their punching bag. I've been taking their crap for years, and you never once stand up for me." She didn't flinch, just kept those arms crossed tight, her face all calm and collected like she'd rehearsed this. "You don't get it," she said. "This is how they are. You just have to deal with it. Deal with it." 7 years of snide comments, fake smiles, and tests I couldn't pass, and she thought I should just keep swallowing it. My voice stayed low, but it was shaking now. I shouldn't have to deal with it. You should have had my back down there. Instead, you let them treat me like I'm nothing." She sighed, long and dramatic, like I was exhausting her. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, and I could hear her mother in her tone, that same superior edge. That's when I lost it, not loud, not wild, just this quiet snap inside me. "No, Marissa," I said, "I'm not. I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm done being the guy they kick around while you watch." Her eyes narrowed, and she stood up, finally dropping those crossed arms. "You have two options, Callum," she said, her voice hard now. "Apologize or leave." I froze. The room went so still I could hear the wind rattling the old windows. Apologize? For what? For trying to say something real? For wanting my wife to care? I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to soften, to show me she didn't mean it. But she just stood there, chin up, like she'd drawn a line and dared me to cross it. I'd spent years fighting for us, arguing my case to her family, proving I was good enough, begging her to see me as more than the guy they didn't want her to marry. And now she was giving me an ultimatum, like I was the one who'd failed. My chest hurt, this deep, heavy ache, but my head was clear for the first time in a long time. I didn't yell back. I didn't beg her to change her mind. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who'd chosen them over me again. "Okay," I said, my voice steady even though I felt like I was breaking. She blinked, like she hadn't expected that, but I didn't give her time to respond. I turned, grabbed my duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. Not everything, just what I needed. A few shirts, my jeans, my toothbrush. She watched me, silent now, and I could feel her eyes on my back, but she didn't say a word. "No, wait, no, let's talk, nothing." I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked to the door. My hand was on the knob when she finally spoke. "You're really doing this?" she asked, and there was a crack in her voice, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I didn't turn around. "Yeah," I said. "I am." And then I walked out. The hallway was dark, the house quiet except for the faint hum of voices downstairs. I moved fast, down those stupid winding stairs, past the portraits of her ancestors staring at me like they knew I didn't belong. My truck was parked out front, and I threw my bag in the back, climbed in, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the night, and I drove off, the estate shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going yet, just that I wasn't staying. My hands gripped the wheel tight, and my heart was pounding, but I didn't feel trapped anymore. I'd spent so long trying to fit into her world, bending myself to make it work, and in that moment, I realized I didn't have to. She'd given me a choice, apologize or leave, and I'd picked the one she didn't think I would. The road stretched out ahead, empty and black, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I'm Callum Ridgway, and I didn't look back after I left that big, cold house on the cliff. The truck's engine rumbled under me as I drove away from the reunion, away from Marissa and her family, away from 7 years of trying to be someone I wasn't. My hands were still tied on the wheel, my bag bouncing in the back seat, and my mind was spinning, but I didn't feel lost, not yet. I just knew I couldn't go home, not to the condo we shared, not to the life that felt like a cage with her name on it. I drove through the night, the road dark and quiet, passing little towns with their lights winking out one by one. My phone stayed off. I didn't want to hear her voice, or Gregory's, or Blythe's, didn't want to see the messages I knew would come. About 2 hours in, I saw a sign for a small airport, one of those regional ones you'd miss if you weren't looking. It wasn't much, barely more than a strip of runway and a low brick building, but something about it pulled me in. I parked the truck, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. The place was half asleep, just a bored guy at the counter and a couple of vending machines humming in the corner. I didn't have a plan. Didn't even know where I wanted to go, but when I got to the desk, I asked, "What's the next flight out?" The guy barely looked up, tapping at his computer. "Got one to Oregon in 40 minutes, he said. One way's $200. Oregon. I'd never been there, never even thought about it much, but it sounded far, far from New York, far from her family, far from the mess I'd just walked out of. "I'll take it," I said, pulling out my card. He shrugged, printed the ticket, and handed it over like it was no big deal. To him, it wasn't. To me, it was everything. I sat on a hard plastic chair near the gate, my bag at my feet, watching the clock tick down. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't fear, it was something else, something like relief mixed with a kind of wild energy I hadn't felt in years. The plane was small, one of those puddle jumpers with tight seats and a single aisle, but I didn't care. I squeezed in next to a window, buckled up, and stared out at the dark runway. When the engines roared and we started rolling, I felt the ground slip away, and with it, all the weight I'd been carrying. Up there, 20,000 feet in the air, it was just me and the hum of the plane, no voices telling me what I should do, no eyes judging me for what I wasn't. I kept my phone off the whole flight, didn't even check it when we landed. I didn't want to know if Marissa had called, didn't want to hear her ask why I'd left or tell me to come back. The airport in Oregon was bigger but still quiet, the kind of place where people move slow and don't ask questions. I rented a car with cash, a beat-up sedan that smelled like old coffee, and drove toward the coast. I didn't have a map, just a vague idea of heading west until I hit water. The sky was starting to lighten by the time I got there, gray and soft with the promise of morning. I found a cheap motel near the beach, the kind with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered. The lady at the desk didn't care who I was or why I was there, just took my money and gave me a key. The room was small bed, chair, a sink with a cracked mirror, but it was mine, at least for now. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the faint sound of waves outside. My hands were shaking a little, not from cold, but from the rush of it all. I'd done it. I'd walked out, bought a ticket, and landed halfway across the country with no plan and no apologies. Part of me wondered what Marissa was doing right then. Had she told her family yet? Were they laughing about it, saying they knew I'd crack eventually? I could picture Blythe shaking her head, Gregory smirking, and Marissa sitting there, maybe confused, maybe mad, but probably not chasing after me. She'd given me that ultimatum, apologize or leave, and I'd picked the door she didn't think I'd take. I lay back on the bed, staring at the stained ceiling, and let the quiet sink in. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me. For the first time in years, I wasn't answering to anybody out. Not her family, not even myself in that old, pleading way I used to. The air smelled like salt and freedom, and even though I didn't know what came next, I knew I wasn't going back. Oregon was a blank slate, a place where I could breathe without someone telling me I was doing it wrong. I closed my eyes, the sound of the ocean seeping through the thin walls, and thought, this is it. This is mine. The one-way ticket wasn't just a flight, it was a line I'd drawn, and I wasn't crossing back over it. I'm Callum Ridgway, and those first couple of days in Oregon felt like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's, a better one, a quieter one. I woke up in that cheap motel room with the cracked mirror and the sound of waves sneaking through the window, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anybody. My phone was still off, shoved deep in my bag, and I wasn't ready to turn it back on. I didn't want to know what was waiting for me, missed calls, texts, whatever Marissa or her family had to say. I just wanted the silence, and Oregon gave it to me. After a quick shower in that tiny bathroom, I grabbed my stuff and checked out, figuring I'd find something more permanent. The lady at the desk didn't even look up when I dropped the key, and I liked that. No questions, no fuss. I drove along the coast in that rented sedan, the ocean on my left, gray and endless, and the trees on my right, tall and green in a way I wasn't used to back east. It was beautiful, but not in a loud way, just steady, like it didn't need to prove anything. I ended up in a small town, one of those places with a single main street and a handful of shops that looked like they'd been there forever. There was a sign in a window, studio for rent, $600 per month. I pulled over, called the number, and met a guy named Tom who smelled like fish and handed me the keys after I gave him cash for the first month. The place was nothing fancy, one room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a view of the water if you leaned out the window just right. But it was mine. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the lumpy couch, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That first day, I walked down to the beach, hands in my pockets, the wind tugging at my jacket. The sand was cold under my shoes, and the waves rolled in slow and steady, like they were telling me to take my time. I felt lighter than I had in years, like all that weight from Marissa's family, their jabs, their rules, their expectations had stayed back in New York. I picked up a couple freelance IT jobs online, easy stuff I could do from anywhere, and bought some groceries from a little store where the cashier smiled at me like I was a regular already. It was simple, and simple was what quickly I needed. By day 3, the piece started to crack. I'd left my phone off, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me, and I powered it up. The screen lit up with notifications, one after another, like a storm rolling in. Marissa had called 10 times, left voicemails I didn't listen to. Gregory sent a text, "You're a real piece of work," running off like that. Blythe's message was longer, something about how I'd disgraced the family and abandoned my responsibilities. I scrolled through it all, my stomach twisting, but I didn't let it sink in too deep. I'd heard it before, their anger, their blame, and I wasn't going to carry it anymore. There were messages from my sister too, worried ones, and a couple from my buddy Dorian, just checking in. I'd get back to them later, but not yet. I deleted the family group chats Marissa had forced me into, those endless threads of her cousins planning brunches and her mother sending passive-aggressive reminders about etiquette. My phone felt cleaner after that, like I'd scrubbed off a layer of grime. The calls kept coming, though, Marissa again, then Gregory, then a number I didn't recognize but figured was Blythe using someone else's phone. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the panic or the rage, didn't need to know if they were cursing me or crying. I already knew the script. I was the bad guy, the quitter, the one who couldn't handle it. Fine. Let them think that. I sat down at the little table in my studio, opened my laptop, and typed an email to Marissa. It wasn't long, just a few lines. I'm safe. I'm not coming back. If you need to contact me, speak to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I'd get one soon enough. I hit send, shut the laptop, and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. No apology, no excuses, no room for her to argue. That was it, the last thing I'd say to her for a while, maybe ever. The phone buzzed again, but I turned it off and tossed it on the couch. Outside, the sky was turning pink over the water, and I stepped onto the tiny balcony, breathing in the salty air. I could hear seagulls and the low hum of a boat somewhere far off. This was my life now, quiet, mine, no one else's rules. I didn't know how long it'd last, didn't know what they'd do next, but for those first 48 hours, I'd found something I hadn't had in years: peace. Silence wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the absence of their voices, their demands, their judgment. It said everything I couldn't put into words. I'd walked away, and I wasn't looking back. The waves kept rolling in, steady and sure, and I let them wash over me, drowning out the past one crash at a time. I'm Callum Ridgway, and after a week in Oregon, I started to feel like the dust was finally settling, not just around me, but inside me too. That little studio by the coast was home now, with its creaky floors and the salty breeze that slipped through the window every morning. I'd wake up to the sound of waves, make coffee in the chipped mug I'd bought from a thrift store, and sit at my table with my laptop, picking up freelance IT jobs to keep the bills paid. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and that was enough. Back in New York, I could only imagine what they were saying about me. Marissa's family had a way of turning everything into a story where they were the victims, and I was the villain who'd stormed out and left them all in ruins. He abandoned us. I could hear Blythe saying, her voice dripping with that fake hurt she was so good at. He was unstable, Gregory would add, smirking like he'd always known I'd crack. He couldn't handle the pressure, Marissa might say, quiet and sad, like she was disappointed but not surprised. I didn't have to guess too hard. I'd lived with their judgment long enough to know how they'd spin it. They'd sit around that big table at the estate, sipping wine and picking me apart, convincing themselves I'd been the problem all along. But I wasn't there to hear it, and that was the best part. I had people who saw it differently, though, my own witnesses, you could say. My sister, Ellie, had watched me shrink over the years, trying to fit into Marissa's world. She'd call me after every visit to their house, asking, "Why do you let them treat you like that?" I'd shrug it off, tell her it wasn't a big deal, but she knew better. My best friend Dorian was the same. He'd been there from the start, back when Marissa and I were just dating, and he'd seen me slowly disappear into the shadow of her family. "You're not yourself around them, man," he'd say, and I'd laugh it off, but he was right. They'd both tried to warn me, in their own ways, that I was losing something, myself, maybe, and now that I was gone, I could feel it coming back. Marissa didn't file for divorce, not right away, and that didn't surprise me. She wasn't the type to act fast. She'd wait, play it out, see if I'd break first. Blythe probably told her I'd come crawling back, tail between my legs, begging for forgiveness. They always do. I could hear her saying, all smug and certain, like I was some predictable stray dog. Gregory would back her up, saying I didn't have the guts to stay gone. They'd sit there, plotting how long it'd take me to crack, how many days before I showed up at the condo with an apology and a promise to behave. But days turned into weeks, and I didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. I'd sent that one email, "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Talk to my lawyer," and that was it. Radio silence from my end, and it drove them crazy, I bet. I could picture Marissa checking her phone, waiting for something that wasn't coming, her mother hovering over her shoulder, telling her to be patient. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. Out here, I was breathing again, really breathing, not just sucking in air between their jabs and expectations. The air in Oregon was clean, sharp with salt and pine, and it filled my lungs like it was washing out all the years I'd spent holding my breath. I'd walk the beach in the mornings, hands in my pockets, watching the waves roll in and out, and it was like they were smoothing over the rough edges inside me. I didn't need much, just my little place, my work, and the quiet. I deleted their voices from my phone, their faces from my head, and every day I stayed gone, I felt stronger, like I was building something new out of the pieces they'd tried to break. I thought about my mom sometimes, how she'd raised me and Ellie on her own after Dad died, working long shifts at the hospital to keep us fed. She never apologized for who she was, never bent to fit anyone else's idea of her, and I'd forgotten that about myself somewhere along the way. Marissa's family had made me feel small, like I had to prove I was worth something, but out here, I didn't have to prove a damn thing. The people I met, the guy at the grocery store, the lady who ran the coffee shop down the street, didn't care where I came from or who I'd married. They just nodded, said hi, and let me be. It was simple, and simple was freedom. I kept my phone off most of the time now, only turning it on to check in with Ellie or Dorian, who'd both cheered when I told them I'd left. About time, Ellie said, and Dorian just laughed, saying, I knew you had it in you. They were my anchors, the ones who reminded me I wasn't crazy for walking away. Marissa could wait all she wanted, her family could spin their stories, but I wasn't going back. The dust had settled, and I was still standing stronger, quieter, and finally free. I'm Callum Ridgway, and 2 months after I landed in Oregon, I had to go back, not to stay, not to fix things, just to get what was mine. I'd been living light in that little coastal studio, working my freelance gigs, breathing the salty air, but there were things in the condo I couldn't leave behind forever. Not furniture or fancy stuff, Marissa could keep all that, but the small things that mattered. My mom's old books, a watch my dad gave me before he passed, a couple photos of me and Ellie when we were kids. Those were mine, legally and in every other way, and I wasn't letting them stay buried in her world. So I booked a cheap flight back to New York, rented a car at the airport, and drove to the condo on a gray Tuesday morning. The whole trip felt like walking into a memory I didn't want to relive, the familiar roads, the hum of the city, the weight of it all creeping back. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not Marissa, not her family, not even Ellie or Dorian. I wanted it quick and quiet, in and out before they could turn it into a fight. The condo looked the same when I pulled up, sleek building, glass windows, the kind of place her money had picked out, not mine. I still had my key, and it turned in the lock easy enough, the doors swinging open to that sterile, expensive smell I'd never liked. The place was empty, or so I thought. Marissa's shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't on the rack. I let out a breath and got to work, pulling a couple boxes from the closet and starting in the bedroom. I grabbed the books from my nightstand, the watch from the drawer, and a handful of clothes I didn't mind taking. It felt strange, being there without her voice in the background, without her eyes watching me like I was about to mess something up. I was halfway through packing when the door opened behind me. I froze, hands on a photo frame, and turned to see Marissa standing there. No warning, no call, just her in that coat her mother gave her, the one that cost more than my truck. She looked the same, dark hair pulled back, face calm, but her eyes were wider than usual, like she hadn't expected me. Callum, she said, and her voice was soft, almost shaky. I nodded, keeping my hands busy with the box. Just getting my stuff, I said, not looking at her too long. She stepped inside, closing the door, and stood there like she didn't know what to do. You really meant it, she said, and it wasn't a question. I nodded again. Yeah. She moved closer, her boots clicking on the hardwood, and I could feel her trying to figure me out, like she always did. We can fix this, she said, and her voice had that practiced tone, the one she used when she thought she could talk me into anything. I shook my head, slow and sure, and kept packing. No, we can't. She went quiet then, and I thought maybe she'd leave, but she didn't. She just stood there, watching me fold a shirt, her arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together. You didn't even try, she said after a minute, and there was a bite to it now, a little of that anger I'd been waiting for. I stopped, looked at her straight on, and said, I tried for 7 years, Marissa. You didn't. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she wasn't sure how to argue that. I went back to the box, stacking the photos, feeling the air get heavier between us. You never fought for me, I said, keeping my voice steady even though it hurt to say it out loud. You fought to keep me in place, to keep me quiet, to keep them happy. But you never fought for me. She flinched, just a little, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe realization, but it was gone fast. That's not fair, she said, but it sounded weak, like she didn't believe it herself. I shrugged, taping up the box. Maybe not. But it's true. I picked up the second box, started on the living room, some old records, a mug I liked, and she followed me, hovering like she wanted to stop me but didn't know how. What am I supposed to tell them? She asked, and I knew she meant her family. I didn't look up. Whatever you want. I don't care anymore. That hit her. I could tell, because she went quiet again, longer this time. I kept moving, kept packing, and when I was done, I had 2 boxes and my bag, ready to go. She was still standing there, coat on, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Callum, she said, one last try, but I shook my head again. I'm done, Marissa. Take care. I walked past her, out the door, down the hall to the elevator. She didn't follow, didn't call after me, and when the doors closed, I felt that weight lift again. I drove straight to the airport, shipped the boxes to Oregon, and caught the next flight out. Back on the coast, I landed under a sky full of stars, the ocean waiting for me like it always did. That last visit didn't change anything. It just closed the door I'd already walked through. She still didn't get it, still thought it was about fixing something broken. But it wasn't. It was about letting go. I'm Callum Ridgway, and after I got back to Oregon from that last trip to New York, I started building something real, not just a life, but a version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. The boxes from the condo arrived a few days later, and I unpacked them slow, setting my mom's books on a shelf I'd picked up from a garage sale, hanging the photo of me and Ellie on the wall by the couch. The watch from my dad stayed in its box for now. I wasn't ready to wear it yet, but knowing it was there felt right. That little studio by the coast was starting to look like mine, not just a place to crash, and every piece I added made it feel more solid. I'd been freelancing since I got here, fixing people's tech problems online, but I decided to push it further, started advertising my services around town, handing out flyers at the coffee shop and the hardware store. Word spread quick, and soon I had steady clients, small businesses mostly, who liked that I didn't overcomplicate things or overcharge them. They didn't care that I wasn't from some big-name family or that I'd married into money they'd never see. They just cared that I showed up and got the job done. It was a kind of respect I hadn't felt in years, and it built me up, brick by brick, into someone I could stand to look at in the mirror. The town was small, but the people were good, honest in a way Marissa's crowd never was. I met a guy named Pete at the diner one morning, a fisherman with hands like sandpaper who'd nod at me over his coffee like we'd known each other forever. There was Sarah, who ran the coffee shop and always slipped me an extra muffin when I came in, saying, "You look like you could use it." They didn't ask about my past, didn't need to know my tax bracket or who I'd been married to, and that was a relief I didn't know I'd been craving. I started hanging out with them more, grabbing a beer with Pete after his boat came in, helping Sarah fix her ancient computer when it crashed. They became my people, not because I forced it, but because it just happened, natural and easy. I got back in touch with Ellie too, calling her one night after I'd settled in. She picked up on the first ring, her voice bright and loud. "Callum, you're alive." I laughed, told her about the studio, the ocean, the work I was doing. She said she was proud of me, and I could hear the truth in it. She'd been waiting for me to break free longer than I had. We talked about mom and dad, about how she was doing back home, and I promised I'd visit soon. It felt good, having her voice in my ear again, like a piece of my old self slotting back into place. I started hiking on weekends, following trails through the woods or along the cliffs, the kind of thing I'd never had time for back east. The air was sharp, the views wide, and it cleared my head in a way nothing else did. One Saturday, I stopped by the local shelter on a whim and came home with a dog, a scruffy mutt with one ear that stuck up funny. I named him Booker after nothing in particular, just a name that fit. He'd follow me everywhere, trotting along on walks or curling up by my feet while I worked. He didn't ask for much, just food, a pat on the head, a quick run on the beach, and giving him that made me feel steady, like I was good for something again. It's funny how the simplest things started to mean the most. I'd sit on my balcony at night, Booker snoring beside me, listening to the waves and watching the stars prick through the dark. The work was picking up. I was consulting full-time now, building systems for local shops, troubleshooting networks, and people trusted me, relied on me, without needing to know my whole story. I traded the condo's polished floors for this creaky little place, the city noise for the ocean's hum, and it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd spent so long in Marissa's shadow, bending to fit her family's rules, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Out here, I didn't have to explain myself, didn't have to apologize for where I came from or what I didn't have. Pete would slap me on the back and say, "Good to have you around, Cal," and Sarah would grin when I fixed her printer, and that was enough. Booker would nudge my hand with his wet nose, and I'd laugh, scratching his ears, thinking how easy it was to make him happy. I'd found peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet sort that sinks in slow and stays. It was in the salt air, the steady rhythm of my days, the way I could hear myself think again. I was rebuilding, one small piece at a time, and every brick I laid felt like a step away from the man I'd been, the one who'd begged for a seat at a table that never wanted him. I'm Callum Ridgway, and after months of quiet in Oregon, the past started creeping back, not loud or crashing in, but soft, like echoes I couldn't quite shake. I'd built a good rhythm out here, work, walks with Booker, coffee with Sarah, beers with Pete, and it felt solid, like the life I'd always wanted but didn't know I could have. The studio was home now, with its thrift store shelves and the sound of the ocean keeping me company at night. I'd stopped checking my phone for messages from Marissa or her family, stopped bracing for their next move. I thought I'd left them behind for good, but then one morning, I opened my laptop and saw an email from her. It wasn't much, just a few lines, no subject, but it stopped me cold. I sat there at my little table, coffee going cold in my hands, staring at her name on the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, keep the peace I'd fought so hard for, but another part, the stubborn part, maybe clicked it open. She didn't beg me to come back, didn't try to guilt me like her mother would have. It was simpler than that, sadder too. "I see it now, Callum," she wrote. How it unraveled. "I was so busy trying to keep them happy, Mom, Gregory, all of them, that I didn't see I was losing you. I'm sorry." That was it. No promises, no pleas, just regret laid out plain and quiet. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. Booker nosed at my leg, whining for his walk, but I just sat there, staring at the words. It wasn't anger that hit me. I'd burned through that months ago. It was something else, a kind of tired ache. She saw it now, she said, but where was that clarity when I was standing in front of her, asking her to choose me? Where was it when I was packing my bag, waiting for her to say something, anything, to stop me? I didn't reply. Not because I was mad, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. Silence felt truer than any words I could send back. It was the answer she'd never heard when I was still there, still trying. I closed the laptop, grabbed Booker's leash, and took him out to the beach, letting the wind and the waves drown out the echo of her email. The sand was cold under my boots, and Booker ran ahead, chasing gulls, while I walked slow, hands in my pockets, thinking it over. She'd lost me long before I left, and I'd lost her too, somewhere between her family's rules and my own breaking point. That email didn't change anything. It just confirmed what I already knew. I was done carrying her regret along with mine. A few months later, another letter came, this time in the mail, handwritten on thick paper that smelled faintly of Blythe's perfume. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Marissa didn't write letters, but her mother loved the drama of it. I stood by the mailbox, the ocean rumbling in the distance, and tore it open. "Callum," it started, all formal and sharp. "You broke my daughter's heart. You walked away from your responsibilities, from our family, and left her to pick up the pieces. I hope you're proud of yourself." The rest was more of the same. Condescension dripping from every line, blaming me like I'd torched their perfect little world. I read it once, standing there in the wind, then walked inside and fed it to the shredder by my desk. The machine whirred, chewing it up, and I watched the pieces fall into the trash, feeling nothing but relief. Blythe didn't get it, never would. She thought I'd broken Marissa, but Marissa had broken herself, choosing them over me every chance she got. I wasn't proud of leaving, but I wasn't ashamed either. It was what I had to do to breathe again. I didn't know her an answer, didn't know her anything anymore. The shredder clicked off, and I took Booker for another walk, letting the salt air clear my head. Those echoes, Marissa's email, Blythe's letter, kept coming, but they didn't stick. I'd built too much here to let them pull me back. Work was steady now, my clients relying on me, And I liked the weight of that, the way it kept me grounded. Pete and I had started fishing on weekends, just a little boat, and some quiet hours on the water, and Sarah would tease me about my sunburn when I came into the shop after. Ellie called sometimes, telling me about her life back east, and I'd tell her about Booker's latest trick or the view from my balcony. It was small, this world I'd made, but it was solid, and it didn't bend to anyone else's rules. The past could echo all it wanted. Marissa could regret. Blythe could rage. But I wasn't listening anymore. I'd found my footing, one step at a time, and every day I stayed gone, those voices got quieter. I'd sit out on the bluff some nights, watching the waves crash under the stars, and feel the truth settle in. I didn't need their forgiveness, didn't need their understanding. I had this. The ocean, the dog, the people who didn't care where I'd come from, and it was enough. I'm Callum Ridgway, and it's been a year since I walked out of that big house in New York, a year since I bought that one-way ticket to Oregon and decided to stop explaining myself. The divorce is final now, papers signed, lawyers paid, all the loose ends tied up neat and clean. I live in a modest place on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a step up from the studio but still simple, with a porch where I can sit and watch the water stretch out forever. I wake up early most days, make coffee, and take Booker for a walk along the shore before I settle into work, still in tech, still fixing systems and solving problems, but on my terms now. The air's always got that salty bite to it, and the sound of the waves is a constant, like a heartbeat I've gotten used to. It's not a flashy life, but it's mine, and that's the biggest change of all. I don't answer to anyone anymore. Back when I left, Marissa wanted an apology, wanted me to bend one last time to fit her world, but I chose the ticket instead, and I've never looked back. The condo, her family, that whole suffocating mess, it's a memory now, fading a little more every day I spend out here. I think about it sometimes, how I spent 7 years trying to be what they wanted, twisting myself into knots to prove I was good enough. Her mother, Blythe, with her cold stares and sharper words, Gregory with his smirks and jabs, and Marissa, caught between them and me, always picking their side when it mattered. I used to wonder if I could have fought harder, stayed longer, but out here, with the ocean in front of me and Booker at my feet, I know I did the right thing. Leaving wasn't running, it was saving myself. The divorce took months to sort out, longer than it should have, because Marissa dragged her feet. She didn't fight it outright, didn't show up with lawyers screaming, but she stalled, missed deadlines, asked for extensions, like she thought I'd change my mind if she waited me out. I didn't. My lawyer handled most of it, and I kept my distance, sending emails when I had to, keeping it short and to the point. When the final papers came through, I signed them at my kitchen table, the pen scratching loud in the quiet, and felt a weight lift I didn't know was still there. It was done. No more ties, no more claims, just me and the life I'd built. Out here, I've got my routines, work in the mornings, hikes or fishing with Pete on weekends, coffee with Sarah when she's not swamped at the shop. Ellie came to visit once, stayed a week, and we sat on the porch every night, talking about everything and nothing. She said I looked different, lighter, and I told her I felt it too. Booker's grown into himself, still scruffy but smarter now, and he's my shadow, follows me from room to room, sleeps by the door like he's guarding it. The people in town know me, not my whole story, just the parts one share, and they don't ask for more. Pete calls me Cal, like it's always been my name, and Sarah started trusting me with the shop's books when her numbers don't add up. It's a community, not forced or fake, just people living their lives alongside mine. I don't explain myself anymore, not to them, not to anyone. That's the real freedom, the thing I didn't know I'd lost until I got it back. Back in New York, I was always justifying why I did what I did, why I wasn't like them, why I deserved a seat at their table. Here, no one cares. I show up, I do my work, I crack a beer with Pete or toss a stick for Booker, and that's enough. I don't owe anyone my story, don't have to prove I'm worth something. Marissa's family thought love came with conditions: obey, fit in, apologize when you step out of line. But I've learned it doesn't have to. Ellie loves me because I'm her brother, Pete because I'm a friend, Booker because I'm his person. It's simple, and simple's what I needed all along. I think about Marissa sometimes, wonder what she's doing now that the papers are signed. Maybe she's still in the condo, still going to those family dinners, still trying to keep Blythe happy. Her email from months back, the one about regret, sits unanswered in my inbox, and I've never felt the need to change that. She made her choice back then, picking them over me, and I made mine when I walked out. We're even now, in a way, both free to live how we want, just not together. I don't hate her, don't even resent her anymore. It's just done. The Bluff's my home now, with its wide views and quiet nights, and every day I spend here, I feel more like the man I was supposed to be. I work hard, keep things easy, and let the ocean smooth out the rest. No apologies, no looking back, just me, my dog, my people, and a life I built my way.